Hello and welcome to the Media Maker's micro tutorial on Photoshop layer masks. And since we're all feeling a little isolated, I thought it would be fun to show how you can use masks to travel the world in less than 10 minutes. And I will be using free stock photos from Unsplash, so feel free to download your own and practice along with me. And I'm gonna go ahead and open up Photoshop. All right, so here you can see my final version. And I'm going to just take you through the steps from start to finish. And so I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to find my background image. And then usually before I start, I like to add an adjustment layer on top of this just to get any of the white balance for the photo. And so in order to do that, I have my layer over here selected, and then I'm going to click on the adjustment layer tool right here. And then I'm going to open up the Curves tab. And to do the white balance, it's this third eyedropper tool right here. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to click on the lightest area of the photo. And you can see it didn't change too much. If I hit this little eyeball here, it can hide, but it kind of just evens out that color and almost brightens it just a little bit. And that's all I'm going to do for that. And then I'm going to go up to File and find my subject. I'm going to actually do Place Embedded. And then I'm find the subject here. And then I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, or you can press this check mark up here. Now the photo is in here. And there's a really great new tool that Photoshop offers. It's this fourth tool down called the Object Selection tool. And another thing that's really great if you're not super familiar with Photoshop is if you hover over each of these tools, it's going to demonstrate how to use those tools. So here, this one, the Object Selection tool, I'm just going to click and then click and drag where I'm making this marquee rectangle around my subject, and then release. And you can see that Photoshop does a lot of the work for you with making this selection. I'm going to hit Z on my keyboard, and that switched me over to the zoom tool just so I can get in here and just see how good of a job it did with that selection. And it's all right. I'm going to clean it up a little bit here in the next step. So since I have this hair, one thing that I like to do is refine that edge a little bit. And so in order to do that, you go up to select a mask. And then it's going to bring you into a new dialog box where if you don't see this red overlay, all this is if this in this drop down menu over here, I have overlay selected. And that just gives me a bit of contrast to see more what I'm working with what's masked out and what's not. And then I'm going to use the second tool down, which is called the Refine Edge Brush tool, where you can hit R on your keyboard to access it. And I'm just going to go through the hair right quick. And you can see how it's kind of helping refine that selection just a little bit so that you can get that, just like get between the hairs there. And that'll make your transition into a new background a little bit smoother. And so that's all I'm going to do with that tool there. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see how it's adjusted the selection there. And I'm pretty happy with this. I can still adjust this in the next step. And so to turn this into a mask, you have that layer selected, and then it's this third tool down here at the bottom of the layers panel that says add layer mask. It's like a rectangle with a circle in it. And there you go. You can already see how it's shifted where it took out the background of that previous photo and is now fit with the mountains landscape that I want to be in now. All right, and then like I said, there are still some like little areas that weren't quite selected the way that I wanted. And what's really cool about working with mask layers is you can actually use the brush tool. And as long as you have this black foreground and white background, it works as if you're painting in and out that mask. So I'm going to make this a little larger so that you can just see what I'm talking about. So those colors correlate with the way that this mask looks like. So if you want to add to the mask, you want to switch over to white, and I'm going to hit X on my keyboard, and that just quickly allows me to shift back and forth between these two colors. So I'm hitting X, and then I'm just going to quickly, if you wanted to bring in more of the background, that's how you would paint that. If you wanted, if I hit X again, if you wanted to actually take away something, you would just paint over that. And so this next step, I'm going to speed through it, but you're going to watch me just refine those edges just a little bit more so that I get more of that backpack and I get a cleaner edge and get rid of the spacing here. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and up at the top, this is where you can actually do that. And then I'm going to speed through this, and it's just all going to depend on what your photo looks like for how long this process takes. And as you can tell, we need a couple adjustment layers on the subject here because it doesn't really match with the lighting of both photos. So I'm going to do what I did earlier. You want to make sure you do click back onto the photo here versus being on the mask, but then go ahead and add in another adjustment layer and use curves. And so one thing to notice here is that when I start to adjust this, you can tell it's adjusting both of these layers. And so we actually need to clip it to the layer right below it. I'm going to hit Control Z. And to do that, you click on this box with this little arrow. Okay, so now when we clicked on that, you can see that there's this little arrow and this adjustment layer now is stuck with this layer directly beneath it. To make the next adjustments, you want to make sure you click over back on this chart here because this is a layer mask thumbnail, but we want to just make sure we're back on this first option. And then we're going to use this kind of hidden feature. If you hold Alt, you get some extra options when you click on Auto. And we're going to find dark and light colors. So this is going to allow us to find those shadows, midtones, and highlights from the background to kind of help us start that process of matching these. So I'm going to click on this color for shadows, and then you'll get this eyedropper tool. And what you want to do is just kind of find the darkest part on the background and find where their shadows are. And you can adjust it even more. I might make it just a tad bit darker. And then I'm going to use highlights. So then it's going to be sampling those colors from the lightest part. I'm going to hit OK. And then you can use a snap neutral midtones option, and it's going to kind of try to find that balance between those shadows and highlights that you just selected. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then you don't want to, usually you just want to hit no on this because you don't want to change those defaults. All right, you can see that it's still not quite right. So then that's when you can actually go in and add like maybe brightness and contrast. And again, see, it's not clipped there. So I do want to make sure I clip that to that layer. I am going to size her down a little bit. So then if you want to size it, you can go to Edit and then free transform, or you can do Control T or a Command T on Mac. And then you can just grab from the corner and start sizing it to where the proportion looks about where you're happy with it. Might do something like that. And then I'm going to hit enter. I'm done with that. All right, so then I would just keep adding and playing with those different adjustment layers until you get the right lighting match with each of them. And then before you know it, you'll be off to Easter Island, Tokyo, Mexico, Singapore, and Paris. So hopefully this was helpful. And if there's a specific tutorial you'd like to learn, feel free to drop that in the comments and we'd be happy to get that up there for you. Thank you.